everybody. Welcome to the last talk from this year's YAB Online. It's been a strange week. I know if you're like me, well, you've missed actually being away with everybody, but really hope that the last few days have been an encouragement and a blessing to you. I thought that since this is our last night, well, it's only right that I wear my YAB sweatshirt for the last talk. And let me remind you right off from the go today that tonight we're going to finish off YAB with a bang. We have our Zoom quiz at 7:30, so keep a lookout on Facebook and Instagram for the link to join in that quiz. Tonight we're going to jump into Judges chapter 8 as we finish off our series together. But as always, before we head there, well, let's recap on what we thought about last night. Last night we began by thinking about just how ill-equipped Gideon was for what seemed like an impossible task. But the important truth to remember is that God always equips those whom he has called to a task. So God, well, he equipped Gideon. We're told that God clothed Gideon with his spirit, and with God's spirit comes great power. We also see that God gave Gideon faith. He gave him a bigger picture of just how majestic God really is, so that when fear tempted him to fall into despair, well, he would remember the God who was with him. Then we finished off by looking at the issue of pride. You see, it's in our human nature to want to take glory for ourselves. But God didn't want anybody to be able to boast about the victory that would come over the enemy. He wanted them to know for sure that it was him. And so he took the 32,000 men that Gideon had gathered together and he reduced it down to just 300. God wanted the people to look at the victory that he had won for them and to know for sure that it could only come because of him. So now that we're caught up again, well, let's head into Judges chapter 8.
Hey everyone, hope you're having a really good week at YAB. Despite it maybe not being what you had envisioned this year, but I hope you have had a really good week of fellowship with your friends and fun, and also getting to spend more time in God's Word. The leaders honestly always put on the most amazing week and so much thought is put into it, so I'm sure without a doubt that you have had a lot of fun. Honestly, my years at YAB were always amazing and it was a highlight of the summer. Whenever I was too old to go, eventually, honestly, I was so sad. I wish I was still a YABber. But yeah, just honestly getting involved in all the activities. Probably my highlight was the year where we did the Army Assault course. I can't remember the location of it, but I feel like that should definitely be an activity again, because that was just amazing. Like real army officers just yelling at us to like run through dirt and mud and nettles and dear knows what else and climbing over things. So it was amazing, and just I loved all the team activities and just kind of the teamwork and the encouragement to kind of get involved with. There was something for everyone. It was no one was ever left out, which was amazing. And the daily talks each day, getting to hear from different people, which is a real encouragement, and it kind of set you up for the new year at school and just going in feeling really encouraged and uplifted by reading your Bible every day and praying together and encouragement from your friends. So yeah, YAB is amazing, and go you leaders, keeping it going from year to year. So yeah, now I'm going to bring your reading for today or this evening. And we are reading from Judges 8 verses 1 to 7 and then 22 to 27. Now the Ephraimites asked Gideon, "Why have you treated us like this? Why didn't you call us when you went to fight Midian?" And they challenged him vigorously. But he answered them, "What have I accomplished compared to you? Aren't the gleanings of Ephraim's grapes better than the full grape of harvest of Ebenezer? God gave Oreb and Seb, the Midianite leaders, into your hands. What was I able to do compared to you?" At this their resentment against him subsided. Gideon and his 300 men, exhausted yet giving up the pursuit, came to the Jordan and crossed it. He said to the men of Succoth, "Give my troops some bread. They are worn out, and I am still pursuing Seba and Salmunna, the kings of Midian." But the officials of Succoth said, "Do you already have the hands of Seba and Salmunna in your possession? Why should we give bread to your troops?" Then Gideon replied, "Just for that, when the Lord has given Seba and Salmunna into my hand, I will tear your flesh with desert thorns and briars." And then reading from verse 22. The Israelites said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian." But Gideon told them, "I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." And he said, "I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder." It was the custom of the Ishmaelites to wear gold earrings. They answered, "We'll be glad to give them." So they spread out a garment, and each of them threw a ring from the plunder onto it. The weight of the gold rings he asked for came to 700 shekels, not counting the ornaments, the pendants, and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, or the chains that were on the camels' necks. Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshipping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. And ending there at verse 27.
I'm going to ask a really probing question as we begin our last session on Gideon together tonight. And I want you to be honest with me. When's the last time that you had a proper hissy fit? Now, when I think about it, I can't really pinpoint a recent one. Although if you ask Steph, she might be able to tell you one that I've tried to ignore. But my mind is immediately drawn back to a holiday that I had with my family when I was about 14. This was the first holiday that we'd gone on without my sister, because she was now at uni and she decided that instead of going away with us, well, she was going to go away with some of her friends. Now, there wasn't too much to be unhappy about when it came to this holiday because we were in Lanzarote. We were there for 2 weeks. We were staying in this beautiful hotel that wasn't too big, so there was plenty of space around the pool each day. Plus, I had worked out that the TV in our room had a channel that showed the late night show with Jimmy Fallon. And it also showed a few football matches as well. So I was set for my 2 weeks in paradise. However, as the week went on, well, I gradually began to miss my sister more and more. In fact, I began to miss her so much that I started feeling a little bit sorry for myself and I started thinking about things that might cheer me up. Then, one night, there it was. We walked past an electronics shop that was sitting along the promenade, and as I looked in the window, there was a PSP, a portable PlayStation. I looked at it and I thought to myself, these aren't even out back at home yet. They're not even in the UK. That would save my holiday. If I got a PSP and the FIFA game to go with it, I would be set. I wouldn't miss my sister anymore. I'd be super happy. So I decided to do my best to get that PSP. I did that whole, whoa mum, look at this. This isn't even out at home yet. And look, it's cheaper here than it would be back in Northern Ireland. But that didn't really work. My mum was not convinced that this was a good idea. She kind of thought to herself, well, what if this isn't the real deal? What if it breaks when we get home? Who's going to help us get it fixed? And she was right, of course, but I was absolutely raging. Long story short, I didn't get the PSP, and for the next day or so, I was in a foul mood. And I'm not proud of it. You see, thinking about that now, well, I wish I could go back in time and have a good chat with the 14-year-old me. I tell myself off for being so selfish, or I might just give myself a good slap. But the fact remains that in that moment, I was having a good old hissy fit because things didn't go the way I thought they should have. There I was on this incredible holiday in a beautiful place with my great parents. I was enjoying the sunshine and an epic pool, and I was grumbling. I was complaining. That is not pleasant behaviour. I didn't treat my parents very well being in that kind of mood. But it's even worse when people treat God that way. And that brings us nicely to Judges chapter 8. There's no ice lollies by the hotel pool in the beautiful sunshine for Israel, but so far, well, they're pretty much having the perfect day. With just 300 men and facing what looks like to be an impossible task, they defeated the great army of Midian. This is a day to celebrate. This is a day for Gideon to be hailed as a hero. He's become that mighty warrior that God said he would be. There couldn't be anybody that's not in a great mood, could there? Oh yes, there could be. And they're called the Ephraimites. Ephraim was one of the most powerful tribes in Israel, and Gideon had called them back in chapter 7 to help him finish off the fleeing Midianites. Now they'd answered that call, but just a few verses later in Judges 8 verse 1, we discover that they're not happy with Gideon. Here's what they say: "Why didn't you call us when you went to fight Midian?" God has just used this small group of guys to conquer a great army who were intensely oppressing Israel. And here we have the Ephraimites, and they're sulking. So what's going on here? Well, it seems they're unhappy that they've missed out on the glory of the victory. Tim Keller points out that even if they had been called by Gideon to fight, well, it's unlikely that they would have been willing to march under his command. They were one of the strongest tribes, and he was from the weakest clan in the tribe of Manasseh. Perhaps they were thinking to themselves, hold on, we're the brave, mighty, and heroic ones. How could God use Gideon and not us? These guys wanted the glory for themselves. And this reveals an important truth for us. God was right. He knew that Israel would want to boast and glorify themselves in victory. And that's why he made it happen in a way that made it obvious that it was by his power alone that the enemy had been defeated. Ephraim, well, they're kind of like a girl wearing a white dress to their friend's wedding, or someone who announces their own big news at somebody else's celebration. They're glory grabbers and ladder climbers. And isn't that the mindset of so many in our world today? Deep within our hearts, we all have this drive to climb a little bit higher, to grab glory for ourselves, to be noticed, and to make a name for ourselves. But that's an issue, because if we're chasing glory for ourselves, well, then we aren't giving it to God. John D. Alcock says this: to grab at glory is to rob God of what rightly belongs to him alone. It's that serious. Gideon's response to these men, well, it shows us what the opposite of glory grabbing looks like. Gideon could have gone off on a rant and pointed out the impressive victory that he had just won. But he doesn't join in this scrummage for glory. Instead, he acts in humility and he lets it go. He says to them, "What have I accomplished compared to you?" Gideon knew that the victory belongs to the Lord, so he willingly let go of his reputation. And Gideon sets a good example for us, but Jesus sets the perfect example. If ever there was someone who had the right to all of the glory, it was Jesus, but he let it go as well. And we see that when we read Philippians 2, verses 5 to 8. Here's what those verses say. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. This is love. We try to grab glory for ourselves, and so we rob God. We deserve to be punished for this offensive and rebellious behavior, but instead, Jesus chose to give up his glory, and he went to the cross so that we could be saved. Jesus has set the ultimate example, and now he calls us to live like him. In the words of John D. Alcock, we should stop climbing and start loving. Stop competing and start serving. Stop envying and start rejoicing when God is at work in others. Sadly, well, glory grabbers aren't the only negative ones that we find in Judges 8. As we come to verse 6, we see the men of Succoth, and their problem is a problem of commitment. In verse 6, they basically say to Gideon, "Have you finished the Midianite kings off yet? No, you haven't. So don't come looking for help until the threat's gone. Tim Keller says that they know that if Gideon isn't able to catch and kill the Midianite leaders, well, then they'll regroup and return. And if that were to happen, well, then it would be assumed that any town that helped Gideon would be in for it. So these men, well, they decide to stay on the fence for now until they see what happens. See, these guys, they're out to look after themselves and they don't want to take any risks. This mindset does not impress Gideon, and he gives a pretty strong response to these men. He says, "After the Lord gives me victory over Zebah and Zalmunna, I will return and tear your flesh with the thorns and briars from the wilderness." In other words, well, if you won't commit now, well, then you'll never share in my victory. I'm sure you've noticed that this victory comes in two stages. The first stage is in Judges 7, when God's people attack and the enemy is dealt a killer blow. From that moment, well, the victory wasn't in doubt, but it isn't completely over because the completion of the victory comes in Judges 8. In between those two stages, the people of God, well, they should have committed themselves to Gideon, but they didn't. And so when the final victory came, well, they missed out on the great joy and celebration. John T. Alcock says, Gideon kept his words. No celebration, only suffering. No happiness, only punishment. No freedom, only death. As we consider this story, well, we should see our own situation and the decision that we're called to make as well. You see, we too have a great enemy called sin and death. This is the enemy that Jesus came to defeat for us. But his victory, well, it's in two stages as well. Stage 1 was when he died on the cross and then rose again. In that moment, well, he dealt a killer blow to death and the grave. But the victory isn't yet complete. You see, one day Jesus will return and sin and death will be destroyed forever. The victory, well, it's not in doubt, it's secure, the outcome is certain. So the decision for us is this: will we commit to Jesus now so that we can share in his final victory? Or will we have the same commitment issues as the men of Sukkoth? And in the end, will we find only punishment and death? It might seem risky, it may even seem costly, but it's the greatest decision that you could ever make. Let's not sit in the fence or grasp for glory for ourselves. Instead, well, let's cling to Jesus and let's find hope that never fails. In the end, the leaders of Midian are killed and the victory is complete. There isn't exactly the happy ending that we might hope for Gideon, though. You see, the people don't actually live happily ever after. Let me explain why. Back in chapter 7, verse 15, we read that Gideon responded to hearing the dream and its interpretation about victory by worshipping God. But that's actually the last time that we see Gideon doing that. As we look at him in chapter 8, Tim Keller says this. He says, now he worships success and the honor it will bring him. He has entirely forgotten who it is that called him, equipped him, reassured him, and won the battle for him. It seems that the Israelites have done the same thing as well, because in verse 22, we see them asking Gideon to be their king. And look what they say: rule over us, because you have saved us. Do you see what they're doing here? They're giving the glory to Gideon, not to God. Now, Gideon's response, well, it might fill us with a moment of hope, because he says to them, no, I'm not going to rule you, because God rules over you. Oh, thank goodness. Gideon's not lost it after all. He hasn't forgotten who God is or what he's done, but not so fast, because look at what happens next. Gideon asks the people for gold, the kind of thing that a king would do. He uses that gold to make himself an ephod, which is an item of clothing that a king would wear. He makes his town the capital city of God's people, like a king would do. And to top it all off, he has a son, and he calls his son Abimelech. What does that name mean? Well, it means my dad is king. Seriously, Gideon? He isn't even being subtle about his heart's desires here. It seems clear that Gideon wants the privileges of being a king, but without the responsibility. The people needed him to lead them in worship of God, but he refused. Sadly though, well, he does actually end up leading the people because he leads them into disaster. Just look at what verse 27 tells us. Gideon made a second ephod from the gold and put it in Ophrah, his hometown, but soon all the Israelites prostituted themselves by worshipping it. Not too long after Gideon dies, we're told that the people did not remember the Lord their God. In fact, if you flick to the end of the book of Judges, here's what we see in Judges 21 verse 25. It says, "In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit." As we come to the end of YAB 2020 and our look at the life of Gideon, John D. Alcock says that something should be very clear to us. The story of Gideon is screaming out to us, you need someone to save you. You need someone to rule you. Here comes that big sign and that big R once again that we've seen throughout our time in the book of Judges. It's pointing to Jesus. It's telling us we need him. We've already seen that Jesus is the one who saved us through his death. But he didn't stay dead because we also need a ruler, someone to lead us, someone to keep us from wandering after these pointless idols. The promise that God gave to Micah proves that Jesus is that ruler, that person that we so desperately need. And you, O Bethlehem in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah, for a ruler will come from you who will be the shepherd for my people Israel. That baby who was born in Bethlehem was called Jesus because he would save his people from their sin. But he's also called the Good Shepherd because he's a great ruler as well. Jesus saves and Jesus rules because he is the great king, the king that we all need. As we finish up for YAB this year, well, let me ask you, is Jesus your king? You see, it's time for us to stop reaching for glory and trusting in ourselves. It's time for us to let go and to trust in Christ alone. Jesus is the one who saves and the one who rules. But the amazing thing is that the Bible describes being ruled by Jesus as this, as freedom. And that freedom can be ours when we give our lives to him. As we finish up, well, once again, there's a song that's going to play just to give you a few minutes to reflect on and think about the things we've been discussing together today. But let me just say, even though YAB is coming to an end today, we are still here. So if you want to chat about anything that we've discussed all week, myself or some of the other YAB leaders, we would love to chat to you. And maybe you're not a Christian and you want to put your trust in Jesus. Well, we would love to help lead you to him. So please do get in touch if there's anything at all that you want to talk about. Thank you very much for tuning in this week, and I will see you at the quiz tonight.